Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. I am your host, Mike, and of course, I am joined by Joa. Joa, say hello to the fine folks.
Well, hello there.
And of course, we are joined by our blogger, Ted. Ted, say hello to the fine folks.
All right, hello everyone.
All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're new to the show, this is something that we do quite, I guess, often. You could say we don't do it regularly, as maybe as we should, Joa. But this is our character dissection. This is where we pick a character from the saga, the Holy Saga, and we break down that character, figure out what's going on in their head, what this means, what that means, and all that other good jazz. So this one here is interesting because it's Han Solo, of course, which is a big deal, Joe, as I would think. But actually, a year, well, almost a year in Anaheim. Ted, we met Ted in Anaheim, and we started talking, and Ted, we realized as a fan of Han Solo, and I'm like, great. When we get to that point, we're gonna have Ted come on and talk Han Solo, and here we are now. Now, of course, we were gonna do this actually last year, but Joe and I heard a rumor that Han Solo was gonna die in Episode 7, which is The Force Awakens, and so Joe and I put this on hold. And not only that, because we figured, everything we know about Han Solo and Harrison Ford and his love or hate for the character, you kind of get the feeling that, well, he was going to end in Episode 7. So enough of that talk, because that's part 2 of this whole dissection. Well, let's get into this, folks, because let's get into Han Solo dissection. And I'll start with you, Ted. We first meet the young Han Solo sitting there at the cantina, acting like I guess, kind of a badass, Mr. Confident, sure of himself type of guy. What were your initial impressions of Han Solo?
I liked him. I thought, looking at him, he kind of I felt like he had Chewie, his sidekick, doing all the work and trying to find them jobs to do, and Han's just kicking back there, letting Chewbacca do all that work. But he comes in there and he introduces himself, as Han Solo, captain of the Millennium Falcon. So he's very proud of this ship, and he lets you know right away. And then he starts this dialogue with Luke and Obi-Wan, and you could just sort of see as he's talking to him, trying to get information about them. He doesn't really negotiate with them too much over what kind of job he's getting into, because when it comes time to name the price for the job, he goes straight ahead and says, hey, 10,000 up front, which is the money he owes to Jabba the Hutt. So he's looking, to milk these guys for as much as he possibly could. But
Well,
I thought it was
yeah, go ahead, Ted.
no, but I thought it was a good introduction to him. You got a sense of who he was, and that he's this smuggler and very boastful, if you will.
Well, I thought it was always funny. He says, these guys must really be desperate, when truth is he's actually the one who's desperate. Joe, do you think when we first meet Han, obviously I always picture him as my brother, and I have a love-hate relationship with my brother. Han's kind of cocky. He kind of thinks like, he brags about himself, but is he really assured of himself? I don't know. So that's my question to you, Joe. What are your impressions of Han when you first see him? And then do you think he's overconfident, or he's just, braggadocious and, all that type of stuff? So give me your thoughts.
I don't know that he is overconfident necessarily internally. I think as we go on through this dissection, there's going to be many points we bring up. But when you first meet him, he obviously gives off the indication that I'm a very confident person. I know what I'm doing. What, you've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? Like, what's wrong with you? It's like, what's wrong with you? That's kind of how he's throwing it at him. You've never heard, and he's very, as Ted said, and bring this up as we go through. He's very proud of a possession, and what I always thought, also, Solo always by himself, but he's not. He's always got Chewie. So I don't know. Is that kind of like a Lone Ranger kind of reference, that like he's called the Lone Ranger, I guess, because he's the Lone Ranger, but he's always got
Everyone's
got
to have a sidekick,
right?
though.
So
Everyone's going to have a sidekick.
but he's called the Lone Ranger, and he's called Han Solo, but he has the sidekick. So it kind of goes against. But does he have other friends? Is that why he kind of is at this point when we first meet him? Is that he doesn't have any other friend? All he really has is the shirt on his back, Chewie, who's got maybe several shirts on his back that can be made into or something. I don't know, a carpet at least. And then he's got the Falcon, and that's what he has. And as confident as you can be, he obviously doesn't have enough credits to pay Jabba back. So how confident can a broke smuggler who's got a bounty on his head, how confident can you really be as a person? So I think he is very boastful, and he projects that. I don't know if it's necessarily what he feels inside, though. I think he has some insecurities, and again, when we move along later, maybe he passes some of those along.
Ted, what do you think? Insecure, maybe just overconfident? What do you think?
I think and I think we see some of this in The Force Awakens, and we can talk about that when we get to that point. But I think he's an excellent smuggler. I think he has a reputation for being the best smuggler. I just think he's also a terrible businessman, and that he's the kind of guy that you hire for the toughest jobs. Interesting enough, I almost feel like Han Solo and Indiana Jones are very similar characters, which, of course, they're both played by Harrison Ford, and we know he loves Indiana Jones and sort of had this hateful, at one point he seemed to have hated Han Solo, but I think they're very similar characters in that, Han Solo is the smuggler you hire for the toughest jobs, and I think he likes that sort of adrenaline, that excitement of the toughest jobs, but he's not going to go about it in a very, I don't want to say efficient manner, but he's not very good at planning it. He just kind of makes things up as he goes along and kind of gets by the skin of his teeth. But at the end of the day, he has some successes, but I think he takes on these tough jobs that no one else wants. But he's just not very good about being organized and going about his business. And I don't think he's a very good businessman, but I do think he's a good smuggler.
I could see that. Now, let me ask you this about his cavalier state of doing things, where he's just kind of, he takes a risk with it. He doesn't really plan things out. He just kind of does his thing. I mean, it's chaotic, but it's a plan without having a plan, and it always kind of works for him, similar to talking his way out of everything. I don't know. What are your thoughts on his just, being cavalier and kind of doing things where, other people would plan things out, like Joe and I with the show? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way he operates, and I think he does have this confidence. I mean, maybe it's just a naivety that, he doesn't really understand the implications of what it is that he's doing, but he just never feels like, you don't get the sense that he feels like he's going to fail, that he sort of knows what he's doing, or he's certainly willing to take these unbelievable risks, and just with the belief that he's going to pull through, because I guess he's, always pulled through. He's probably done these things in the past, and he's lived to tell about it, and so he just feels like he can just go on doing these things, and that just works for him.
Okay, Joe, any thoughts on that of him being so cavalier, or is it more of like just foolhardy, just kind of winging it, or is it I mean, it just fits Han. That's what he would do, I guess. Yeah, and there's something to be said about it. I mean, it works. So what's the bad thing, right? So.
Well, and I think that the thing is I don't think he has necessarily any formal training of how to do anything. I mean, yeah, I mean, you go back to the old legends and the backstory that, once he was in the, in the Empire, and so maybe he has some skills with the blaster and everything, and obviously he does have skills with those, but I think, like Ted said, it's kind of like making it up as you go along, and I think maybe that's why he didn't last in the Empire, if that's the way they end up kind of ever revealing the backstory again. Maybe he just doesn't. Obviously, I think that's kind of obvious. He's not the type that deals well with authority. But, I mean, and when I say he was like insecure, I don't mean like I just mean like, I think maybe in a way he's just kind of overcompensating just a little bit. Not that he's not confident that he
There could be a lot of jokes said right here, right now, I'm just saying. But go ahead, Joe.
Well, but the only it's a very big ship, but no, I just that's where I kind of go with it, is that I don't necessarily mean, I guess maybe your standard textbook psychology of he's overcompensating insecurity with overconfidence or anything like that. I just think that he's sort of he's maybe I think he maybe is that good, what he portrays himself to be, but I just think somewhere deep down he doesn't really feel that maybe he's that good. It's kind of like us, Mike. Like, we kind of present ourselves in a certain way, and then we're like, oh, that sucked, and then everybody tells us like, oh no, that was really good. Like, we love this and that, the content of this. So I kind of, it seems like there's a little bit of, I can kind of feel that within there. So I don't know, maybe I'm a little off base with the introduction of Han, but that's kind of where I'm going with it.
All right, well, going back to, his name, Han Solo, obviously he means, it's Solo, he's by himself. But, like, going back to your point, Joe, he's, the Lone Ranger. He's got Tonto on his side here, in a way. He's got Chewbacca. So, and I always thought that Chewbacca was his conscience. We'll talk that, I guess, at the end of it. I'll say how Chewie I'm convinced that Chewie convinced him to go back and go help Luke out. But well, first off, I'll just say, well, doesn't this say more about that Han's always had that caring side, that caring seed within him? It was never really brought out. Maybe it was just because it's Chewie, the loyal sidekick. Maybe he only cared about him at that time. What are your thoughts on Han and Chewie's relationship before we get into the very controversial topic of A New Hope? So Ted, what do you think?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, and it was funny what you said. I was trying to understand, is Chewbacca his moral compass, so to speak. I'm not 100% convinced that he is. I do believe that he convinced Han at the end of A New Hope to stick around and help out with Luke and the whole destruction of the Death Star. I think Chewie was influential, but I also got the sense too that Chewie kind of goes the flow. He doesn't really protest all that much about whatever Han is doing. Han charges after those stormtroopers in the Death Star. He just goes running after him, and Chewie kind of tags along, keeping his distance, but he doesn't really say, hey, let's not do this. I mean, the only time I think I've seen Chewie sort of complain a little bit is, he doesn't want to go. The things that bother Chewbacca, like not wanting to jump into the garbage chute because it smells, or in The Force Awakens, he's complaining that he's cold, even though he's got a natural built-in fur coat. So I don't I don't feel like Han is necessarily a nice person. Han the smuggler, and I don't think it bothers Chewie all that much. I mean, Chewie, at least in the realm of working as a smuggling team, Chewbacca seems to go along with everything that they're doing, and they seem to work well together. He's not I wouldn't call him a yes man per se, but he's just, they don't really seem to clash all that much.
All right, so it's very similar to you and I, Joe, on the podcast. So Joe, what are your thoughts on Han and Chewie and their relationship? Is he Han's moral compass? I almost said corpus. Compass there. So what do you think, Joe?
No, that would be the other way around, right? No, anyway, I don't. I think Ted makes some good points. I don't know that he's necessarily always telling Han like this is the right thing to do or not. I think at the end of the day, I think Han is the captain of the Millennium Falcon, and I think Chewbacca, I think he has a say in certain things that when he wants to. I think Chewbacca would have a say in anything that he wanted to have a say in. I think then, Han would probably hear him out, but I don't know. But like Ted said at the beginning, he's sending Chewie out to find the work. So he's kind of doing a little bit of the grunt work while Han is enjoying a drink in the cantina, which is kind of weird. If Jabba the Hutt is looking for you, why are you like on his home planet? It's like, wouldn't you like go somewhere else? I don't know. Like that's I don't know. No,
it's like Obi-Wan hiding in plain sight. That's what just like right in front of you. Hey, I'm right here.
I'll change my first name, but not my last name. Like that's too inconvenient for me. Like,
well, hey, the Kenobis are popular.
Yeah, it's the Smith of the Star Wars galaxy. But anyway, no, I don't necessarily think that Chewie is a moral compass. I think going back to whether Han is a nice guy or not a nice guy, I think that Han is loyal at the end of the day. He just doesn't know it when we meet him. He's very loyal. He's loyal to Chewie. He's loyal to the Falcon. He's loyal to Luke when eventually he's loyal to Leia. He's loyal even to, and we'll get into it. He eventually becomes loyal to the Rebel Alliance. So once he has a reason and he can trust, and I think this is where the insecurity. This is what I was talking about with insecurity. He has that insecurity because he probably doesn't feel like he can trust anybody. So that's a measure, a form of insecurity. I can't trust this person, so I can't be I can't be myself. I've got to put this persona on. Once he's able to trust Leia and Luke, not that he's not still a smartass, because he is. I mean, let's face it, and he never stops being one. But it's more of a joking, loving way. And then he would do anything for these people, and there's going to be a lot of instances we're going to bring up tonight as we go on.
All right, so let's move on to the big controversial thing that gets all of us Star Wars fans talking and raging and everything else. Me, actually, it doesn't bother me all that much, which is weird because, I don't know, it just doesn't bother me. So we get to Han versus Greedo. Who shot first? I don't know. I don't care. Like Harrison Ford said, I don't care, really. I mean, it's not that big of a deal to me. Because we're dissecting the character, I'll say this going forward, is I prefer Han shooting him first because it shows how far his character goes. He goes from the guy that just shoots in cold blood and self-preservation, and it really wasn't cold blood in a way because he was self-preservation. He was saving himself. So in a way, it wasn't completely bad, I guess you could say, but you know, it shows a good progression of his character all the way through. Now, dude, you can sit there and complain that the Greedo shooting first thing, or them at the same time, or whatever, however you want to spin it, or whatever. It doesn't really bother me all that much. It is what it is. I enjoy it either way. And maybe because I'm not a big Han Solo guy, I don't know. But I'll throw it to you, Ted. Where do you lay on the controversy of this, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I just like the original version of that scene overall. I was thinking about this over the weekend a little bit and said, well, does it really change Han's character at all? And I'm not sure that it does. As you said, it wasn't like he was sitting in the booth. Greedo had his gun pointed at him. You knew that Han at least knew, and we all sort of knew he wasn't going to make it out of there alive. Greedo wasn't there to let him go. He was probably going to try and looking for any excuse to shoot him at that point, and Han knew it. And so at the end of the day, I mean, one is Han shows the original scene shows Han maybe being a little bit more calculating and having a little bit better situational awareness and quicker to the draw. The other one shows him being a little bit more lucky per se. But I think overall, Han, who Han is as a character doesn't change one way or the other. I don't think so as I look at that scene.
Well, again, it works both ways because he is a lucky character. Like luck plays a lot in his thing. So I guess it could be worked either way. Joe, what do you think? Where do you lay on the contrary? I don't think we ever really talked about this, you and I.
I think it's one of those. That's why, because I don't think that we care about it. Like, it's not like we don't care about any of the edited stuff, like whether it's whether he added in CGI and then they added more in for the Blu-rays and stuff. I think overall we enjoy most of it. So the stuff that's, because I think most of it is like it's like it doesn't change anything, like Ted's saying. Maybe the Han thing maybe a little bit more than other scenes, but sometimes it's just background stuff. It's just a creature in the background or more creatures or something like that. So I think that's why it's just not of an interest to us, and we're not one of these guys that are clamoring for a release on Blu-ray of the original theatrical version of the movie. It's just not something we're interested in. But getting back to Han, I do, I mean, it goes back to, it doesn't matter to me whether he shot first or not. It doesn't change my opinion of him, because he's still, whether Greedo shoots first or he shoots first, it's like literally such a split second that he was going for his gun anyway, right? So I mean, he was pulling the trigger basically at the exact same moment Greedo was. It wasn't like, I don't know, I guess in the 97 version, I guess there was that kind of second where he could have pulled the trigger after it landed over his head. But then how does Greedo even miss that shot? I don't know. It's just weird. So, no, it doesn't change his character to me. I mean, he had the gun ready to go, so he knew the situation that he was in, and I think that tells you more about the character than whether who shot first or not.
I think you can make a good point there, because Han is always, he's got that, and Ted mentioned it, he's got the situational awareness. Even though he's lucky a lot, he's making it up as he goes, he's always aware of his surroundings. So that's a benefit to him. And I think that's where we're going with that. I mean, I don't think it's at the end of the day, it's really not a big deal to me. I mean, Greedo, he dies. I mean, Han lives. So, I mean, either way, all three things that you see, he dies. So, I mean, I felt bad for Greedo, really. I mean, it had his head fried when your head falls on the thing, the smoke's coming up and everything else. So, and I liked Greedo as a character, like a kid. Before I saw the movie, I had my brother's action figure. I love Greedo. I thought, oh, this guy's cool, blah, blah, blah. Then I saw the movie. I'm like, oh, man. That stinks, but anyway. So let's move on to unless anyone else, Ted, you have any more to say on the big shootout?
No, and the only other thing I'd say about that, in all three versions of it, Greedo never saw it coming. So I mean, it wasn't like they altered it. So like it was like a standing back to back, going 10 paces in some sort of fair duel. So I was just thinking about that Hans slowly, slyly pulled out the gun, and no matter what version you see, that remains true.
And not only that, Greedo's not a very good bounty hunter. First off, to not realize that Han would have a gun, like a blaster right underneath the table. I mean, that's the oldest Western trick in the book. I mean, come on now. So anyway, we'll move on to the Jabba confrontation, which is another kind of controversial thing in the special edition stuff. I don't see a problem with it at all. I get to see Boba Fett, and I was excited about that. Now, the CGI with Jabba is a little wonky. I'll give you that. But in any case, Ted, what are your thoughts on his confrontation with Jabba? Now, does this? I think it adds a little bit more to like who's this Jabba character, and we get introduced to him and Han's danger of with the bounty and stuff like that. I guess basically, if you go to the originals, it makes perfect sense at that time. But as we got older and everything else, and Jabba the Hutt, it makes more sense because we all know Jabba now. Why not add him in there and add more depth to the movie itself? I guess I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I've always liked that scene, and my understanding too is part of the reason why it was never in the original version was they wanted Jabba to be a creature, and they just didn't have the technology really to make it happen. And if you ever saw the original version, he's a human being, and when they put Jabba in the CGI, that's why they had Han step on his tail because they had to factor that into everything. But overall, as a scene, and I think Joao, whether it was in the notes or had mentioned something about whether or not. Well, at least certainly in Force Awakens, Han talks about being a good talker and being able to talk his way out of trouble, and I guess we can figure out if that's actually true. But I thought this was one of the instances where he's actually pretty good at talking his way. He was able to talk Jabba into giving him more time, albeit for more money. But I think it just sort of goes to show, at least at this point in time, that Han does have the respect of being a
Well, yeah, I mean, he does. He talks his way out of it, and he goes, he can shoot his way, and he can also talk his way out, so to speak. So I guess it's kind of a two ways there, Joe. When you think about it, he can do different things at he can shoot you, and he can talk his way out. What do you think, Joe? At this meetup of Jabba the Hutt and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of he does talk his way out of it, so it kind of gives that line with this scene. It kind of gives that line a little bit more, in the Force Awakens, a little bit more levity, because it was supposed to be a joke in that movie, but it was it turns into that anyway. So I think what it shows though is that not only is he a respected smuggler by Jabba, it's almost like Jabba almost didn't want to. It's almost like Jabba didn't want to put that bounty on him. You know what I mean? He actually kind of likes Han, even though he's this smartass and he's poking fun at Jabba and making fun of him. It seems like Han is.
Well, it goes back to what Ted said. He's like the best smuggler, and he does the dangerous job, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, for whatever reason Jabba likes him, maybe he likes him because he is the best smuggler. He's kind of happy about the situation. He's not like, well, don't disappoint me again. But he's also like all about his money, though, too, at the end of the day. And then he's finally has enough of him, as we see, later on. But, at that point, he's kind of willing to let Han walk away. He didn't have to. He could have took him right there, and he doesn't. And that was obviously filmed originally without all of the technology and stuff. So that was, an original scene thought out by George Lucas. It wasn't just something that was completely all added afterwards. So that was that you can really take that as a part of the story. And so, yeah, I just look at it that way, that even he at one point he even has Jabba the Hutt's respect.
Well, I mean, he does complain about him dropping the spice because of the first sight of the Imperial ships and stuff. So I don't know, Ted, any more thoughts on the meetup?
Like I said, I thought it was a good addition in it. Like I said, it sort of added to the story and let you kind of understand what was going to be happening in the future, leading into the Empire Strikes Back and leading to the situation in Return of the Jedi. So it was just an opportunity to kind of give that point of the story, that part of Han's story, a little bit more weight and so forth.
All right, well, we'll move on to the first love of Han's life and the real special lady in his life, the Falcon, the Millennium Falcon. I mean, they're one and the same, and it's kind of cool because we're all guys. We all kind of have, affinity with a car or something like that at one point. At least our first car. It's always, it's very special because we get to drive around and be cool and everything else. So Ted, what are your thoughts? Now, first off, it's not a ship that I like at all, but it's just that ship that's always there, bailing everybody out, and it's just like that old reliable car that you can depend on. It's like that old pickup truck. Me personally, I like the Slave One. I think it's the badass ship and everything. But Ted, what are your thoughts on the Falcon when we first see it and on all that? You would think, because it's Star Wars, we'd have this fantastical ship, but yet we get this hunk of junk. So what do you think of the Falcon and Han's relationship with the Falcon?
Oh yeah, I mean, I love the ship. The ship is really is become a character in its own right. Although I always thought it looked cool, so I never really, it's always funny to see, and that's sort of the running joke. Everyone calls it a hunk of junk. That's Luke's first reaction when he sees it. But I never really thought it looked like junk. I mean, to me, it was like, wow, this is a pretty cool looking spaceship. I didn't. So I mean, I guess in their world, that's what qualifies or classifies as just a hunk of junk. But yeah, it's just a neat ship, and really became a character unto itself in the saga.
Which is obviously why Han's attached to the ship. Now, can you relate to any like being attached to a car or anything like that? I mean, is this? I mean, of course, this is like a homage to American Graffiti with all the guys being attached to the car and everything, which is it's a cool thing because Han, obviously Harrison was in that as well. So what are your thoughts with his relationship with the Falcon itself?
Yeah, I mean it's a hot rod. It's not like something he went to we know how he got it. Of course, he didn't buy it off the lot. And of course, like a true drag racing vehicle, he's made all sorts of modifications to it. So it's a labor of love that he and Chewie have worked on this thing and really personalized it, so to speak, and made it their own. So it is this very personal thing for him.
Joe, what are your thoughts on the Falcon and Han's relationship with said Falcon?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about him, what I said earlier about him, he's kind of got the shirt on his back, Chewie, and the Falcon. Well, if the Falcon is seen as this hunk of junk in their galaxy, then he kind of relates to the Falcon in a way. It's like, okay, everybody else thinks it's this ugly, old piece of junk that probably, they probably think it can't run and all this stuff, and he probably, and people underestimate it, and people probably underestimate him. And again, it goes to the overconfidence. Not overconfidence, that's the wrong word. Y'all got me saying that. It goes back to his confidence and his bravado. He has to kind of overcompensate for it, and he overcompensates for the Falcon. He defends it. So it's this very it is like a character because he treats it like one, and then it's like don't judge the ship, man. It's like I really think it was like when Luke said that, it was, I go back to that Family Guy thing on Blue Harvest, and he was like, yes, this was my brother's ship, he had leukemia, thank you. Like, he's just, and I just thought that was because I feel like it was such a good joke on the Family Guy thing, because I really felt like Han took it so personally, and even though he didn't allow it to come out in his voice, but I still think that probably somewhere inside of him it probably burned him when Luke said it. So he gets defensive, but he's not like, hey, wait a minute. He's still calm, cool, and collective, and he was like, I'm gonna make 0.5 past light speed, and he drops it and goes from there. So but yeah, it obviously, like you said, goes to the and George has the affinity for cars as well. Mm-hmm. So he probably put a little bit of himself into the Han Solo character at that point.
Well, that goes back to the George Lucas dissection I want to do, well, the psychology of George Lucas, where we break down each character's multi-personality. But anyway, let's get into the hokey religions and ancient weapons. There's no match for a blaster at your side, kid. Now, this is where I identify with Han, because if some of you don't know, I guess you could label me as an atheist. And Han essentially is an atheist here because he doesn't believe in the Force. He doesn't believe in all this crazy stuff that he can't see or feel or anything like that. And obviously he's not Force sensitive or anything like that. And he's not for like a lightsaber or anything like that. His blasters bailed him out of quite a bit, as we saw earlier in the Cantina. So what are your thoughts on his, I guess, worldview here, Ted, on like the Force and all that other stuff? So what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I begin to wonder if Han is someone who has to see something in order to believe it. And I don't know what kind of discussions or talks he may have had about the Force or Jedi with anyone, but we see Chewbacca in Revenge of the Sith, and he's helping fight the battle on Kashyyyk, working with Jedi Knights. He carries off Yoda to safety. So obviously Chewbacca I don't know if he's a believer, but he's certainly familiar with the whole Jedi Knights and the Clone Wars and everything. So he's someone that could pipe in and say, "Oh no, 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 these guys are real." I've had firsthand. So, I don't know how often that's come up in any sort of conversation. And even Han would have been probably a teenager towards the end of the Clone Wars there. I mean, but again, we don't really know how news travels in this galaxy to know what he may not have known or whatnot. So I just sort of chalk it up to maybe he's someone that has to see things in order to really believe it and experience things. He'll take his own word for what's real and not in the galaxy.
And I'm like that myself. I'm very much I need to see it to believe it type of guy. And this is one part of me that actually relates with Han in a way. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on the hokey religions and ancient weapons and so forth?
Well, and he makes reference to, there's nothing controls my destiny. There's no mystical energy field, and in a way, the Force absolutely at this point when he interacts with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke, and then they're on the Falcon when he says this, that's exactly what has happened. The Force has taken him.
Well, it goes back to my theory that.
Yes, I know, and I keep giving you more ammunition every time I talk. I know.
I know.
I'm actually starting to come along to your side because I just keep doing it. So maybe this will be the next YouTube video we do. I don't know, but and that's the funny thing. He's sitting here saying like nothing controls my destiny, and in fact, it's been right within these last few moments of your life that the Force has kind of taken you under its wing in a way, and now you're going to be whisked off into this wild adventure that's pretty much going to, well, really does last for his entire life until he dies. So, it's just kind of funny that he says that. As far as the not believing it thing, I can very much identify with not believing things like without seeing it. Like you got to show me, like I've got to have some kind of evidence, some kind of empirical evidence, like you got to show me, and so it's hard for me to. It's like sometimes you hope things are real, but like you're like, I'm just gonna like be cynical until I actually see it, and so, I can identify with that in a way. But he kind of says like they're simple tricks, so he knows that they can do certain things, but I think he more thinks of them in the way of like there's some kind of a magician or something, like they're pulling rabbits out of hats and so he's probably seen something or heard they can do things or whatever, but he probably thinks that there's some kind of other ploy, like it was a setup or something, and that that must have been thinking ahead, because he doesn't think ahead, like we've said. So it must be people that think ahead and plan things out, and they're orchestrating tricks on us all. And so I mean, I think he had an idea, obviously, of what the Jedi were just based on that line itself, but as far as his belief in it, he probably hasn't had much personal experience with it. So but it does kind of give you a glean into what his personality and what kind of person he is, Mike. Like you said, on our world, we would call it probably something akin to an atheist.
Well, I'll say this: if we hadn't learned anything in this Han Solo dissection, we've learned that Jedi Knights are the David Copperfield of the Star Wars galaxy. So, with that, let's move on to no Alderaan and the tractor beam. So Han seems to be a little baffled that there's no Alderaan when he comes up and approaches it and whatnot. And then of course we get the scout, the TIE fighter that comes over, and obviously Han's very experienced here. This is where his worldly traveling and smuggling experience comes in, because he kind of, although he does take a back step to Obi-Wan when actually it's almost like this is where maybe he gets respect for Obi-Wan when Obi-Wan says to him, well, no, that's no space station, it's a moon. I mean, that's no moon, that's a space station. I get it reversed there, and whatnot. So, Ted, please share your expertise on this, sir.
Yeah, I mean it's a great scene. Obviously, I mean the TIE fighter comes and they see it, and Han's like, he knows what the Falcon can do, and he's confident that he can go and catch up to this thing and destroy it basically before it can communicate. And then, as you say, Luke says, hey, he's headed for that small moon, and then that's when sort of Obi-Wan really, he's very much attuned to what's happening, and he's much more aware of what's going on before everybody else. And it's not until it's a little bit too late that Han realizes, oh yeah, we're in some trouble here. Something's going on here, and he's not really quite sure what it is.
All right, Joe, do you think this is where maybe the respect for Obi-Wan kind of starts in a way? I mean, obviously he names his son, but that's a whole other. We'll get to that at some point. But I mean, this is where he sits back and he actually listens to the old geezer here. What do you think?
Well, I think when he says, "I think you're right," like it's like turn around, get out of here. Like I don't necessarily know that it's like, oh, I'm gonna take his advice because he's very worldly.
Well, I mean, he didn't have any choice.
I think he just happens to know at that point as well, and he's like, yeah, I think you're right, and he's just like, you're right, we gotta get the hell out of here. So, um, no, I don't necessarily go that he's there with him yet because he's still arguing with him when they get on the Death Star and stuff. So. I don't think that I don't know at what point did I don't think it was in well I don't think it was really in Ben's lifetime when or Obi-Wan's lifetime. I guess I should clarify and say that he grew to found any respect for him. I think that must have came at a later date and upon reflection as he got older and things calmed down with the war and stuff. So or it might not even have taken that long, but I mean at some point I mean he obviously said, hey, maybe we don't make it out of here without that guy shutting off the tractor beam and stuff. But no, I mean, he's a good smuggler. He knows a situation when he sees it. So I think him and Obi-Wan was using the Force. Han is using his eyes, his senses, his just normal human abilities. But good. He has a gut feeling about things, I think, and that's what he was going on with that, and it just happened to be the right gut feeling and went along with what Obi-Wan was saying.
All right, fair enough. All right, well, let's get into the control room and the princess and the rescuing. All that all in the one. We'll kind of group it all together. So I'll throw it to you first, Ted. His first moments with the princess. Well, actually, let's start with the detention block. When they go in, they got the disguises on, and he does what he does, and that sense of humor, which is what I love about Han. If not anything, you can always appreciate his sarcasm, his humor, and his expressions on his face, and that comic relief that he provides to the trio of heroes there. So I'll throw it to you first with all these things here. So they have a field day, sir.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny to think about this because one of the lines that Han throws out is that he takes orders from one person and that's me. And yet if you think about everything from when they put on the stormtrooper uniforms, discover the princess is there, go to the detention block. None of this is Han's idea. He's really not contributing much in the way of a plan, and he's just sort of going along, and he's just listening to, it's Luke's idea to go to the detention block, and he has to be convinced, of course, that he's going to get a lot of money, more wealth than he's ever gotten before, but he's not really. Doesn't feel like he's invested in. He's just kind of tagging along at this point, and it's not that he's not contributing, but he's not taking charge, if you will. He's not really leading the way.
Okay, Joe.
That's something that I found interesting there.
Oh, all right. Well, okay. Any more? The tension. Well, when he meets the princess, when they're talking to the princess. I mean, well, when he first meets her, obviously right then and there you can kind of see the fiery relationship that they were going to have. So I'll throw it to you first, Ted. What did you think of their first meeting of each other, I guess you could say?
Yeah, I mean, it's they hate each other, but they really kind of like each other. I mean, you just sort of got that sense. Yes, there was tension, there was this back and forth, but my sense was that Han was really kind of intrigued by her a little bit, and kind of, I think at that moment, they're in the middle of this gunfight, and she's actually taking a blaster and helping them, shoot stormtroopers, and she's the one that comes up with their escape. I think ultimately he probably gained some instant respect, or at least curiosity on his part. That this isn't your average princess, to say the least.
I would imagine that's where the love started, because she took control like he would. She bailed him out basically, and went from there. So Joe, what are your thoughts on all this? The encountering of the princess, the going to the detention block, the rescue, and all that other stuff. So what do you say? What say you, sir?
Well, I think you got to look at another example, and Ted kind of mentions it with the wealth. I think it's probably maybe my favorite. It's definitely my favorite Han Solo line in A New Hope, when Luke says, "Well, more well than you can imagine," and he says, "I don't know. I can imagine quite a bit." And to me, I don't know why I feel like that reminded me like of something like my dad would say or something. It was just very like. It was just funny. It was he wasn't trying to be. It was like not trying to be funny, but it's just something I would laugh at. It's just like that kind of sarcasm that it's just like, no, like I'm not in a good mood right now, and I'm not being a smartass to play around and to get a laugh out of it. Like I'm seriously irritated, but yet he still has like the charisma to pull it off and make it sound funny. So yeah, so that kind of thing, and and then again going back to this, how does this show his arc as a character? Well, he really hasn't come that far to this point because he's like, how much, and it's still about money at that point. And Ted mentions his interest in her. Well, maybe I'm not deflating your point, but maybe part of it could have been because Luke just told him how rich she was, and so where does the interest in my Kylo Ren just fell down here? He doesn't like me talking about his dad. Sorry. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that Han is like a what is a gold digger. I'm not gonna sit here and say that he's necessarily that, and that's the only reason his interests are piqued in Leia at the very beginning. Obviously, she takes control, like you mentioned, and some guys, a lot of guys find that to be a big turn on. So so there you go. I mean, it's that instant kind of thing for Han. Maybe he likes that. That's one thing they don't really explore in Star Wars. We don't know how frisky he is in that way. So anyway,
we don't need Star Wars 50 Shades of Star Wars. We don't need that.
50 Shades of Solo or something.
Actually, probably be a better movie. But anyway, well, let's get to the trash compactor, where they jump in, and Han does the head first dive, and the Mr. Macho Man there, and they're in there, and of course he says, "What great smell you've just," and he shoots and everything, and he shoots. And is that a sign of him being aggravated going along at this point, Ted, where you had mentioned he's just tagging along? Is this the point where he starts becoming, all right, I have had enough of this charade, I got to take control because these people don't know what the hell they're doing, that type of thing. So what do you think, Ted?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Like, he gets down there and it's like, all right, I've had enough of this. I'm sitting in a big garbage dump. We're not getting anywhere. And he takes the blaster, takes charge, and of course it goes horribly wrong. He makes the utter wrong decision. And then I think after that, as far as the trash compactor was concerned, he just was ready to accept his fate. I mean, ultimately, it was Luke who got him out of that jam with R2 and 3PO. It wasn't Han so much.
Okay, Joe, what do you think here? Is he taking control here? Is he just, being Han, again, flying by the seat of his pants, or is he actually saying, enough of this, I'm going to do what I got to do to get out of here?
Well, I mean, obviously when he shoots there and he's just like, what is this? And then when it starts actually enclosing, I think that's where I think they're just all three or four, I guess. Sorry, Chewie, I left you out again. You didn't get a medal, and I just forgot to mention you. So I think that it could be worse. I could have mispronounced your name, Chewie, so don't take it too offensively. But it goes to I think they're all panicking, and so I don't know if it really speaks to their characters. He's telling Leia, get up on it. She's like, I'm trying, and and Luke's yelling and screaming for 3PO, and Chewbacca's yelling in the background, banging on the door like that's going to help anything. And I think it's just a pure scene of panic, and I don't know how much I really glean from any of their characters in that situation. But it's obviously one of a classic scene, but I don't know how much you can really, because it is like that point. It's like there's no way out, and the walls are closing in on us. So I mean, how would any person react? You're not going to sit around, be cool, calm, and collective, and be like, hey, trash compactor, don't you know that I'm the owner of the Millennium Falcon? I'm the captain of the Millennium Falcon. You're not talking your way out of those walls. You know what I mean? So I don't really glean too much.
His ship's a piece of junk, and he became a piece of junk and was going to get swished. But
yeah, I mean, he did have time to throw in a little levity there, and he said, one thing's for sure, we're all going to be a lot thinner, and so he did have time to toss in a little bit of a witty joke there.
His comedic timing is brilliant. I'll leave it at that. So let's get into obviously the Death Star. They escaped the Death Star. It was planned. That's what Vader wanted to begin with. Han kind of thinks that he did. It seems like he thinks he did something miraculous, and he's the hero of the day, but he's really not, so to speak. So Joe, I'll throw it to you first. And then yeah. So what do you think of this? Like, Hans again being maybe taking a little more credit than he should at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, he thinks once they get past the Tie fighters and stuff, and they escape, and he's like, hey, look at me, it's time to get rewarded. And not only does he want to be rewarded, he wants the praise that goes along with it. And obviously Leia's not willing to give that to him just yet.
Well, no, she's
Really,
the one who's more worldly here. She's the one who says they let us get away. Come on, don't be so stupid. But go ahead, Joe. Continue.
Not this ship, sister. So but it's just I think that to maybe you bring that back to what we were talking about earlier. The word naive kind of came up. He doesn't think anything could be wrong with the Falcon. You can't trace this ship. Why couldn't you trace it? Like, I mean, you don't know what they were doing to it when you were running around trying to save the princess. But again, this is where he's very protective of the Falcon. It goes back to that. He's even when the Falcon himself nor the Falcon could have any. It couldn't be blamed on them if the ship was being tracked. You know what I mean? But like he's still that doesn't compute into his brain. It's just kind of no, it's not not this ship. You're not going to track this. So we got away scot free, and I'm as good as I told you I was. And obviously, again, I don't know if naive is the right word or not, but obviously he was wrong. But
well,
he accepts
that he's wrong because then the TIE fighters come, and then of course him and Luke are doing their thing, and I'm going to throw it to you, Ted, in a second. But one of the things that always made me laugh, even as a kid, because it goes back to what we said initially, I thought of Han as cocky and all this other stuff, and here he is. Luke gets one, and he's all excited, and I don't know if it was jealousy. It's like an older brother saying to a little brother, like, yeah, don't get cocky, kid. Like, you may think you're great, but you're really not that great type of thing. Here's the guy that's always cocky telling the other guy who's not really cocky, don't get cocky or something like that. But Ted, what are your thoughts on this interaction when they're fighting with the TIE fighters here?
Yeah, it definitely felt a little bit competitive, and you have to remember that Han got the first one, I believe, and he didn't get cocky, but he was pretty close, right? He was pretty happy that he got that one, and then also Luke, the rookie, so to speak, the farm boy, gets one, shortly thereafter, and is like, hey, all excited about it, and feel like Han's trying to knock him down a peg, and then they go back and forth, and Luke gets the next one, and then Han, of course, gets the final one with the bigger explosion of the bunch, I think. But yeah, I kind of like that little bit of back and forth. Definitely some competition going on there.
Well, again, it goes back to both of them seem to have an interest in Leia at this point. Now, of course, Luke doesn't know what the real deal is, and neither does Leia, and so forth. And Han, I guess, is going to have this young upstart farm boy show him up in front of the princess here. Joe, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely competition. I just think that's, and I don't know if Luke necessarily had it himself, but I mean, Han, I think that's kind of something that a lot of obviously men are ingrained with, and when you're trying to do that confidence bravado thing, it is. And I don't know, I wouldn't go as far to say like, oh well, I was trying to impress the princess when I shot this, so I wouldn't go there. I don't know why I said that. It was just something that popped in my head, but it's not something that I even really believe that he would be going for at that point. I think he's just basically, again, trying to skirt by on the the skin of his teeth there and just try to get out of another situation. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously a little bit of competition. He's like, wahoo, gets excited, and then, obviously Luke gets it, and he's just like, it's kind of like anything, you do something and you're like pumped up about it, and then somebody else does something and you're like, yeah, that's great, man. Like, and you're, it's like maybe a little bit of jealousy, competition, whatever you want to call it, but it's kind of like, it's like it's not as big of a deal when somebody else does something as it is when you do something. So I think a lot of people could probably relate to that, and I think that's another way that Han is kind of like an everyman. He doesn't have the Force. He's he's not really necessarily uniquely special in any way, except that he's probably the best pilot in the galaxy. But that's just because he just is. It's not from flying a lot or whatever that reason would be. But I'll get into this more as we move along. But through the dissection series. But it's but yeah, I think Han is kind of that everyman, and he's supposed to be the one that's relatable. I think of
Oh,
all of
yeah.
them.
Yeah, obviously.
More and
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, he's us, really, when you think about it. All right, so now they get to the rebel base, they're chilling out or whatever, and Han, talk about, I don't know why he's really sticking around, to be honest. This is a little, because he's very disinterested. He looks at the suicidal plan and all this crazy stuff, and he just wants to get paid, obviously. So maybe that's why he's really hanging around, because obviously he needs all the loot and whatnot. And of course, there's that, line with Luke. I guess that's what you're good at or whatever. What you're best at. So, Ted, I'll throw it to you. What is your thoughts on Han here at this point? Being disinterested, all about himself, and then he like offers Luke a job. Like, hey, I see potential. I see talent. It's like us, Joe, looking for podcasters and bloggers and everything. It's like, hey, we see you. You're pretty good in a fight. You want to come over? So what do you think, Ted?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Han is just, he's feels like he's completed his job at this point. As he said, he's gotten more than he had bargained for. I mean, when you think about it, this was supposed to be, as he called it, a nice, simple little charter. He was supposed to just transport some folks from point A to point B and look at what happened along the way. So yeah, he's ready to just get back to work, pay off his, he reminds us of the debt that he owes really to Jabba, and tries to, I say, pull Luke over at his side and have him join his crew and work with him. Of course, Luke has no interest in doing that, and that's it. And then you see him getting ready to take off, and then that's where you kind of get the sense that Chewbacca's like, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should help these guys out. Where this looks like a pretty good cause here. You saw what we were dealing with back there on the Death Star. What these guys are capable of, I guess. Maybe this is something we can help with, and we don't know what conversation or what exactly changed Han's mind at this point. But the seeds were definitely planted in that scene as he's saying goodbye to Luke.
I don't know. I mean, you could look at, maybe it was the look that Luke gave him, those baby blues there, and kind of gave that look at him and stuff like that. I don't know, Joe. What do you think? Maybe I was all wrong. Maybe it was Luke that kind of batted those baby blue eyes, and he kind of felt guilty. I don't know. What do you think, Joe?
Maybe Luke used a Jedi mind trick, and that's another symbolism to Rey using a Jedi mind trick, and not really knowing how to do it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think the reason he was still hanging around, I think he was too busy counting that money, is why he was still hanging around when they were boarding the X-Wings. And then on top of that, why did he come back? Probably the Chewie thing, but I think this is where you start to see the change in his character. Mm-hmm. He thinks he can trust these people. He likes Leia. He hasn't known her that long. He's known Luke a little bit longer. He knows Luke is, he sees in Luke that Luke is loyal, because Luke is like, we got to save the princess. He was depressed over Obi-Wan dying, and and Luke hasn't done anything to harm him. He hasn't tried to double cross him yet. He hasn't tried to take him in the Jabba to get the money. I mean, he hasn't done anything to not have Han's trust. So I think at this point, Han is trusting Luke. And through that trust, I think, comes caring. And I think that's, at the end of the day, if Chewie had a conversation with him, I'm not saying that didn't happen, but I think that conversation is made easier because he cares about these people now. He at least cares about Luke and what happens to him, and he cares about, Leia to a certain extent at this point, and he cares about what they want to fight for is the Rebel Alliance. So by extension, he now cares about the Rebel Alliance, at least through extension of them. So I think if Chewie, mentioned, hey, pokes him and says, hey, let's go back. There went Kylo Ren again. Sorry. If he did do that, I just think it's made easier because he cares about Luke and Leia now at this point, and now we start seeing the progression of a character.
Okay, and of course, in a true hero fashion, he comes swooping in and helps his buddy. And, Luke can get the shot off and take out the Death Star and stuff like that, which is truly a hero's type of moment. And of course, then he shows up for the celebration. He gets the the award. Of course, Chewie gets nothing. He only convinced Han to come back and help Luke and everything. But hey, whatever. We won't argue that. But Ted, I'll throw it to you. What are your thoughts on Han? As Joe has said, obviously this is when we finally see Han taking that first initial step into a larger world, so to speak. So I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and that this loyalty to his friends, and specifically Luke and Leia, is something that he's establishing at this point, and then we see this sort of really play out we'll talk about that in the Empire Strikes Back. I mean, I'm not sure that he's truly dedicated to the cause of the Rebel Alliance at this point, but he likes these people, and he's willing to, obviously, by the fact that he stuck around for that fight and helped with the Death Star, he's willing now to put his neck on the line as well, to aid them and to help them out. And I think that is, as you say, those first steps for Han at this point at the end of this film.
Okay, Joe, your final thoughts before we take our break?
I think that's we've summed it up pretty well, and I just, he comes back, and maybe we're overestimating Han and saying he just loves these guys now, and that's what it is. Maybe he just wanted all the glory for himself. Wouldn't that just be what you really think of Han in the end? No, I think we've kind of summed. Yeah, I mean, he's there for all the glory. He's like, well, you wouldn't have blown it up, kid, and you owe me one. Now, he does, but he does. All joking aside, he does lord that over Luke's head. You owe me one. Kind of thing, and then we get into now you owe me two. So that's Han's way. It's like he can't. It's almost like not being able to take a compliment, but it's like he can't. I don't know. It's like almost like he can't give a compliment. Like, let's put it that way. He's giving a compliment, but he does it in his own smart ass way. And I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Well, he's gonna get to. Yeah, go ahead, Ted.
I would say he does tell Luke, great shot, kid. That was 1 in a million. So he does kind of give Luke a nice pat on the back when he destroys the Death Star, recognizes what he accomplished there.
Well, I mean, that was kind of a big deal. You did take the Death Star out. But, Joe, a nice Last Crusade reference there. Is it for your glory or his glory type of thing? Just throw that in there. All right, so we're going to take a quick break from we just wrapped up A New Hope. Now we got to go to Empire Strikes Back. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to the Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo dissection part of the dissection here. So let's get into this. Well, I'll throw it to you. I guess I'll throw it to you first, Joe. Mix things up here. Obviously, Han's still with the rebels. He's joined them on Hoth. He's trying to fix again that lovely ship of his. Trying to get it so he can get the heck out of there and pay off Jabba and all that other stuff. So what is this? Obviously, he's still sticking around. He's still caring. As we said before we went to the break, he likes these people. He cares for these people. So I'll throw it right to you.
Well, in the time that's passed between The Empire Strikes Back and A New Hope, obviously he is a little bit more invested now. Ted left it off with the A New Hope discussion there that he wasn't necessarily all in with the rebels, which absolutely that's through extension only because of Luke and Leia, but he wasn't into it. Now it seems like he actually does care about it, but he does have this price on his head, and he's not going to be helping out anybody if he's dead. And in fact, if you think about it, it's kind of unselfish, because if he's bringing bounties towards the rebels, that's not helping their cause either. You know what I mean? So if he's running into bounty hunters on Ord Mantell, that's not helping the rebels out, but that's just bringing them more problems and more attention than they need. So in a way, he could go pay off Jabba. Who's to say he wouldn't come back, though? Like, is he just going to hightail it and leave? Like, I get the feeling that that's what Leia thinks he'll do. She mentions it even on Cloud City, and then you're as good as gone, right? So she thinks he's going to go pay off Jabba, and then he's going to be a feather in the wind or something, as Forrest Gump would say, and he's just going to float away into the thing. So I don't know. I don't necessarily think he would do that. But, in a way, I think it's kind of unselfish that he's like, look, I can't keep bringing these problems to you guys.
Okay, all right, Ted. Well, obviously he cares for Luke here, because he goes after Luke when the temperatures are below zero here or minus below. And of course, even Leia, he's still sticking around because he's got feelings for Leia, and he's mentioning this in the car, that they're going back and forth, that banter. You could use a good kiss, that type of thing is going on here. So, what are your thoughts on this? Obviously, his feelings have gotten stronger. It's been a few years, I imagine, from A New Hope here, so he's a little more invested. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he's completely invested. I mean, Luke and Leia are his friends now. He has feelings for Leia, and he believes that they're mutual too. I mean, he's part of it is I think he feels that sees something in her and can tell that she kind of likes him as well, that this is sort of a mutual thing, although she seems completely unwilling to admit it, and maybe she, doesn't fully realize it or wants to accept that she has feelings for him. So I think he is here mainly because of his friendship with Luke and Leia, and you see it, with Han's willingness to go after Luke in the snowstorm and risk his life, to go save his friend, and he seems the only person really willing to do that.
Well, then we can go into my controversial theory, Joe. Because when you see Obi-Wan talking to Luke and, go to Dagobah, all that other stuff, and, it goes back to that line that he says, no mystical, magical energy field controls my destiny, that type of thing. And then all of a sudden you see Obi-Wan, and then you see Han come right out of Obi-Wan right there, as if he was being guided to Luke right then and there. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'll throw that little grain out. What do you think, Ted? Do you think that's any truth to that at all, my crazy theory?
Maybe. I just think it's more theatrical than anything else. I'm always the one that it just seems like it's, but it could be maybe the Force is sort of guiding Han to Luke. Although I just think that's how Han is. He's lucky. He'll smuggle the hard the hard stuff and he's able to go on a rescue mission, and he's darn well going to rescue the person he's after.
I mean, it also plays into my other theory, Joe, where the Force controls everybody and nobody has any mind control or anything like that, no free will or anything like that. But we'll move on from my crazy theory. But anyway, yes, obviously he cares for Luke. He goes after Luke, which is obviously something that he did it in the previous one. He went back after Luke, so this is twice that he owes him. Joe, what are your thoughts on him going back after Luke and risking his life? Obviously, it's gotten even more, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll touch on one thing Ted said a little earlier with, trying to coax those feelings out of Leia. Again, I think that speaks to a certain insecurity that I think anybody has, and I don't necessarily think it's a unique Han Solo trait that he has these insecurities. But yes, obviously anybody wants to. If you have feelings for somebody, you want those feelings to be reciprocated. But, obviously he needs her to actually reciprocate it and say it back to him and at least admit it, and that's what he's trying to do. And again, but he can't just come out and say it. He can't just sit down to a dinner with the Wampas, treating them to dinner and playing the violin for them, and he could be like, Leia, I'm just going to be completely honest. I really like you. How do you feel about me? He won't do that. He's got to be a smart ass about it because that's the way he plays it, cool and collective. And but as far as Luke, it's the other side of the coin. I think Luke is kind of his other best friend now. Along with Chewie and the Falcon, Luke is he's that little, almost that little brother, I guess you could say. Probably that he never had. I would guess. And so it's just that, he calls him kid and he, all those sorts of things, which is funny now that I just think of it. Not that it has anything to do with Star Wars, but Adam Driver's character on Girls actually calls the Hannah character kid all the time. So that's just a neat little coincidence right there. Whatever, Mike, don't shake your head at me.
I am. But anyway, well, let's get into, obviously.
Okay, let's talk about Han running through Obi-Wan again. Let's go back to that theory.
Yeah, that was more important. But anyway, let's get into, obviously, Han, he goes after Luke, and now he goes after Leia, because he goes back and he gets her to get onto the Falcon to get her out of danger, and she's reluctant to go because, she's stubborn as can be. So again, he's showing more like he's invested, he cares for these people, and whatnot. So, what are your thoughts on him going after Leia? I mean, obviously he does care for her. He's confessed but what do you think of their relationship at this moment? Like they're butting heads, or she's being more resistant? It goes back to what Joe was saying earlier. She thinks he's going to leave, I guess you could say, so because he's been kind of wanting to leave, he just hasn't had a chance to leave. What do you think, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, going back to Rescue Leia, I mean, he understands the situation, and he probably understands her a little bit more. That in her role, she's probably not necessarily going to go down with the ship, but she's going to do her duties until the last possible moment, and to the point where she may not even realize it's too late. So he understands that. So he's sort of stepping in here, saying, "Hey, it's over. The battle's over. We've lost. It's time to go." So I mean, I think he's. Part of it's, his care for her. I think we're starting to see him, as you say, sort of get invested a little bit with the cause of the Rebel Alliance too. I mean, one thing I was thinking about, when the probe droid is coming out there and they get the audio messages of something going on, it's Han and Chewie that go out there to deal with it, and they could have just sent any group of soldiers, to go out and confront this thing, but it's Han and Chewie who volunteer and just doesn't even hesitate to go out and see what's going on here.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I was going to say, all those examples, it's now Han taking control, unlike we were saying he was doing in A New Hope. Now he is being assertive because, again, I think it just goes back to being invested. He wasn't invested when it was money, it was paying off Jabba on the Death Star and all this and that. Now he's invested emotionally. Attachments, I guess, is the key word that we really need to bring up right about now, so we can hit on it going forward as far as passing that along in genealogy and what that can create if you not in Han's case, it's not necessarily a detriment to his character, but obviously there's other people who think that that is a detriment to the character. So we'll get into that. I'm just hitting on that, a little bit of foreshadowing there. But yeah, I mean, I think that he is, obviously the caring for these people, but now he's being the assertive one. He's the one taking control. He's like, no, we're leaving now. He's the one who comes up with the plan. He's going into the asteroid field. Leia argues with him, and he just does it. And then he does the move. We're going to go see Lando. We're going to go do this. He's the one. I'm going to go get Luke. I'll see you in hell. So he is taking absolute, complete control in this movie, something we didn't see in the previous movie, and this is again another evolution of the character.
All right, so are you saying that love is the one that's love and kind of being invested in these people? Obviously, he loves them.
Well, what the Jedi would call attachment, what we would call probably just love, is what is, I think, guiding him, and he wants to leave. He's like, I need to pay off Jabba the Hutt, but but he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to leave. He's just like, look, I can't. It changed my mind when we ran into that bounty hunter. So
well, let me ask.
I don't think it's necessarily a want. It's a necessity. He has to pay off Jabba the Hutt. It's gonna end up costing, and they'll probably do another comic on it where Boba Fett shows up, and when Darth Vader's about to kill him, and Boba Fett screws up the day trying to arrest Han or something. So I mean, who knows what they're gonna do.
Are you trying to take a dig at Boba Fett because it's me? But anyway.
No, I was taking a dig at the comics, so keep going.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, obviously, Ted, it's that love that makes him want to stay around. I mean, is it more of like is it I think it's love that really keeps him around. Obviously, he's not like he was before. That's why maybe he's more assertive because of said love. He's not that shallow guy that was, as we said, he's invested. I think we've established that over and over. But what do you think? Do you think it's more love at this point, or do you think it's more of a responsibility to these people that they can't handle the situation, I can, so I have to go? Or is it because he loves these people, he doesn't want to put them in danger, and he just goes out and does what he's got to do?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe he doesn't realize it yet, but I think in some ways he's obviously found a home here with these people and with this whole group of people, this whole organization in the Rebel Alliance, and maybe he's not ready to fully admit that, but like I said, he feels like he's now a part of it, and as such, he's he cares about it, and so now he's doing what he does. This is he's applying himself here how he probably applied himself to many of his smuggling jobs, where he wanted to get the job done. And I'm not saying he just views this as a job per se, but he's got this set of skills that is carrying over from his smuggling days that he is applying here, to being part of the Rebel Alliance. And because of that, because he's got this loyalty and this new friendship and a home in this organization, that he's doing what he does best.
Okay, fair enough. Joe, any other thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree completely that he obviously his skills from being a smuggler are obviously helping the rebels at this point. We see, if we can just kind of, and I know this isn't necessarily kind of always fit in with the canon, and I hesitate bringing up like the cartoons like Clone Wars and Rebels when we're talking about these characters, like in all of that. Like I know it's canon, but they were made after the fact, and I think everybody kind of understands why I hesitate to bring those situations up. But I mean, you see the things that the rebels kind of have to do on the cartoon show, so you can see where Han's set of skills would really come in handy. So just kind of adding that on like as a cherry on top to Ted's thoughts there.
Well, speaking of the character, he's just evolving more as a character here. He's more crafty. He's showing himself as more of the resilient and crafty guy that's it comes up with these things on the fly, so to speak, floating away with the trash, going in the asteroid field, all these crazy cockamamie things and stuff like that. So, well, let's get to the big thing first. I mean, I guess is when he kisses Leia and they have that moment. She's into it for a moment, and then she's like, "Oh, wait a minute, what the hell am I doing?" That type of thing. What are your thoughts on this, Joe? Their first kiss. What do you make of it? Obviously, it sets up for what happens later in the film, but go ahead.
Well, I think he's finally tired of Leia or trying to coax it out of her, and he's just finally like he's actually going to make like a real move here. So I feel like that maybe because she was a princess, this senator, this person of just such important stature, that maybe if it was just a normal girl in the cantina, he would have made the move a long time ago, and kind of got what he wanted. But, because, I mean, you got to imagine, I mean, this is not Han's first rodeo. I mean, let's just be completely honest here. I mean,
Well, he was technically killing
around
Jessica in the cantina before Luke and Ben showed up. Well, but go ahead, Joe. I don't mean to interrupt.
But I mean, we have to imagine with somebody with Han's bravado and suave and charisma, he's been around the block a few times. But I think that he has a respect for Leia, and it's not again about hey, because look, they can't get the hyperdrive going. He's stuck with her, so even if something does happen, it's not a one night stand because you can't just kick her off. There's no. I guess maybe he can put her in a
airlock.
In the Force Awakens, he says that put him in the chute and shoot him to the nearest planet. So I guess the Falcon does have that capability, but he's not going to do that to her. We know, all jokes aside. But I think he's just tired of it, and he makes the move himself. And she never. I mean, not that she says no or anything, but she is apprehensive. My hands are dirty. What are you afraid of? My hands are dirty too. He's tired of the kiss and. Of course, and then C-3PO just ruins everything, which is obviously a very funny, comedical moment. But, it's just one of those moments we realize why Han just does not like C-3PO.
All right, Ted, what do you think? I mean, obviously, Joe makes a good point. He's just tired of the BS, and he's just like, all right, let's just put the cards on the table here and on the sabacc table, and we'll just go from here and whatnot. So
bluff.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, he is a card guy. So, Ted, quickly, what are your thoughts on the kiss, and then we can move a little forward here.
Yeah, I mean, I like this scene. I think it was for the first time probably ever that Leia was on her heels a little bit, and that Han perhaps had the upper hand and a little bit of control over her, not controlling her, but I mean, it was certainly she was the one a little bit on the defensive here, and he had kind of like sort of broken through, and she probably didn't want to really admit that, but I think that was kind of the dynamic that we saw here, which we hadn't really seen between those two before.
All right, okay, so now we get into Han and Lando's relationship, which is a little complex to say the least. I don't know, it's kind of funny that they like each other, they care for each other, they have respect for each other, but they don't trust each other because they all know every trick under the book. There's no honor among thieves and so forth. So, Joe, I'll throw it to you. I mean, do we see a lot of depth in their relationship, right? I mean, I don't at this point know, other than they're established they're both kind of one of the same coin. In a way, Han's more of a shoot first, ask questions later. Now, you would think Lando is the more talky talk guy, gets himself out of the situation and doesn't really pick up the blaster unless he really needs to. So, and I don't want to get into a Lando dissection, but I'll throw it to you first, Joe.
Well, that would be a quick dissection, though. Like, I mean, it really wouldn't be that long. We could do that in about 45 minutes, I feel like. So, I don't know. But
well, what's quicker, Boba Fett or Lando? Boba Fett. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, it'd be about as quick as the Captain Phasma dissection at this point. But anyway, as far as Lando goes, it's he says, I think it's the trust thing you brought up. That's the point I want to hit on. because I've been hitting on that all night. And if people listen to our other dissections, they know I pick up on a theme and then I'll hit on it for the entire time, and I keep bringing it back up. It's kind of what I like to do with these, because I like themes, I like hitting on them, and I think that's where the things are kind of going, because he doesn't trust Lando, and while he has to kind of put his trust in him in a way because he has absolutely no other alternatives, he obviously, why isn't he keeping in contact with Lando? Because he can't trust him. He's not he's a friend, but that's using the term loosely. They're more like, maybe they used to be friends. Let's put it that way. And I think that's more the way to look at it. And he's hoping, and Chewie brings up that well, that was, and then Han says, well, that was a long time ago. So I'm sure he's forgotten about that. So that's where it kind of goes to, and that's the theme I've been hitting on all night, is trust, and that trust builds the friendship for Han. And if Han is able to trust somebody, he's very loyal and he will put everything on the line for you. So, and because that trust creates love and the attachment, and that's just a human thing for Han, and that's what again makes him very human, very relatable at the end of the day for me.
Okay, Ted. Obviously, they have tension because of the Falcon and everything else. Even Lando is very much in love with the Falcon and is upset that he lost it and everything else. Which I'm surprised we didn't get a reference in The Force Awakens that Han mentions, I won it off of Lando and then I lost it to the whatever, the blah blah blah, that whole thing. That would have been nice. But in any case, what are your thoughts on their relationship, the tension that they have? Obviously, something crazy happened. Chewie seems to be the broker, like the neutral guy, like out of all of it. Like again. She was like, all right, guys, all right, come on. We know what's what, but, can we get along here? So what do you think, Ted?
Yeah, everybody loves Chewbacca, right? I mean, even Lando's like happy to see Chewbacca. But no, yeah, I guess what I liked about this is that we learned so much about their relationship just from essentially 2 lines of dialogue. The one that Joao alluded to, that happened a long time ago, and then Lando saying, hey, what have you done to my ship? And which just came out of nowhere, and you realize, what's going on here? That this, is something. This used to be Lando's ship and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, you just get the fact that they were friends at one time, but they don't really like each other, and Han is just there out of, well, he's got no other place to go. But, Lando's willing to, well, we know why. We find out why, because of the betrayal, why Lando is so accepting of it. If it weren't for that, you wonder how Lando might have reacted if the Empire hadn't gotten there first, if they would have even let Han land or, set foot in Cloud City. But, otherwise, like I say, Lando was somewhat welcoming of him, willing to see what was going on, but we know why that is, because the Empire was there and he was ready to hand Han over for his own interests at that point. So,
well, I don't think he had much of a choice. He had to do what he had to do and figured he could save his friend at a later date, so to speak. And I think maybe even Han could accept that, because that's like it's almost like that's something that he would do if he were in that position. I'm wondering if the tables were turned, would he do that? I'll throw it to you, just a hypothetical real quick, Joe. What do you think? If he was in Lando's shoes, would he do the same thing, or would he not? Would Han be more noble than Lando at this point?
Like he's just completely Lando, but he's just,
well, he owns Bespin. Well,
okay, I got you. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I guess. I mean, you couldn't say anything other than that, because then you have to figure he doesn't have Luke, he doesn't have Leia, doesn't even have the Falcon. So you're assuming Lando owns the Falcon at that point, so he's the one. So
all he has is Lobot, man.
I don't.
That's
well,
it.
I don't know. I mean, I'm actually more. I'm more interested in Ted's interpretation of this little theory. So go ahead.
Well, I would say the Han Solo we first meet in A New Hope probably would have been willing to do the same thing. The Han Solo that sets foot in Cloud City, I'm not so sure he would have been that willing to stab his friend in the back at this point, especially now that we see that he's developed some real friendships beyond Chewbacca, that I don't know that if at this point in time Han would have been so willing to just hand his friend over to the Empire. I don't think so, but I think certainly the Han Solo we met in that cantina probably would have been willing to do that.
All right, fair point. All right, so now we get into Leia and Han. They're kind of chilling out on Cloud City, and it's a great peaceful time other than her worried about C-3PO. And of course, Han does care less because it's a droid, and that's the one that particularly annoys him quite a bit. even up till his death, it still found a way to annoy him. But what are your thoughts on them chilling out, Joa, and hanging out and being actually having a chance to breathe and relax, which is something well, obviously in the movies we really don't see. So what are your thoughts?
Well, especially in the original trilogy, we don't see a whole lot of this. That's more of the prequel trilogy kind of style is the development of those characters and just sitting back and having exposition. So, but in these movies, no, you don't get a lot of that. And so this is like kind of one of the opportunities where you see that they're actually in some kind of a relaxed state where they don't feel like they're under pressure. And I think this is the time where Han and Leia have kind of they obviously haven't admitted their feelings to each other because that comes a few moments later. But I think that it's more well understood at this point. He gives her the kiss on the forehead. That's very intimate. Like, I mean,
Well,
that's a
he's
very
comfortable with it.
maneuver.
She's very not like I think she's just like she's using C-3PO as a distraction so she doesn't have to face her feelings at this point. And of course Han's all like, oh, hey, I'm cool with it. We're already dating in my mind. That's what Han's looking at this point. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, it's the Han Solo dissection. So from Han's point of view,
fair enough.
This is very comfortable. And we'll save that for August for the Leia dissection. But so that's the thing is I don't know. It's that one of the rare relaxed times, and he gives her the kiss on the forehead. That's a very intimate suggestion to me. So he's feeling very, very comfortable. He's feeling very comfortable around her, and that when we get to the line here in a few minutes. And that's why I think that the line is spoken. He's like, because he knows he can go up and do that, because he knows.
Excellent. So. All right, Ted, your thoughts on this moment?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll just say this. I think at this point their bond obviously is getting stronger, and I think in part because they're not. Well, I wouldn't say they're exact. It's too strong to say that they're in enemy territory at this point, but they're not necessarily amongst friends. So it's really Han and Leia and Chewbacca. Where's left of 3PO at this point. This is the group, and these are the only people that they know they can 100% trust at this point. So I think that's sort of strengthening their relationship at this point, and it only gets stronger once the Empire's there and Han gets tortured and all this other stuff.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get to the other. Han shoots first, and he definitely shoots first. There's no debating this one. He shoots first at Vader, and no questions asked. And I gotta be honest, I mean, knowing Vader's reputation and everything, I probably would have shot first too, even though it's gonna be nothing. I mean, maybe this is more evidence that the Force, he's kind of seeing it in person now, so it's kind of registering more that he sees, oh, wait a minute, this wizard guy just took my blaster out of my hand, that type of thing. Joe, I'll throw it to you. What are your thoughts on Han shooting first here? Does it conflict with what we see in A New Hope at all? When it's together, when it's set, that whole, Greedo, him shooting first or whatever. But take it away, sir.
I think when he sees Darth Vader, obviously he knows him from the Holo. If you go by the comics that are supposed to be canon now, he's seen him there, so he knows what Darth Vader looks like. He's very well aware. In one way or another, he knows what Darth Vader looks like. Obviously, he kind of saw him for a second on the first Death Star when they were running to the Falcon there. So, I mean, but he knows that this guy is chasing after Luke. And then he knows he's chasing after all of us. He is the kind of he's not the Emperor, but he's kind of like the second guy. So, and I think that's kind of Han's line of thinking there. And it's like, it's just a reaction. It's like, no, it's not. I'm not going to, because he doesn't try to talk his way out of this one. There's no talking your way out of Darth Vader's grip. And I think he knows that. And maybe that leads into something here on the next part two. But, that's why he just pulls it and he goes, and that's a gut reaction. And Han does shoot first. And when I was writing the notes, I kind of thought of that, and that's when I wrote it down. Otherwise, I had never thought of that before. Han shot, in this scene, he does shoot first. I had never really thought of it in that way until I was doing these notes for the show. So it's kind of funny that it came out that way. So So anytime somebody says like Han shoots first, I'm just going to start referencing the when he's tried to shoot Vader. So, but yeah, I mean he knows he's the big baddie, and he's Chewie's with him, Leia's with him. He's trying to just do anything he can to protect them, and obviously doesn't.
Well, I was just gonna say that when you see him shooting, he's got Leia like behind him, kind of holding her and kind of trying to protect her in a way. Maybe that has more to do with it than so much shooting first. Maybe because he's just in protector mode type of moment. Ted, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, the whole scene, I think he's just running off of instinct. I mean, the door opens, Chewie growls, Chewie knows what's going on. They all know what's going on, and they say, yeah, Han shoots first. He didn't just shoot first. He kind of unloads on him. I mean, he got off at least, I think, 3 shots. He just goes boom, 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 and then would have kept going had Vader not, used the Force to pull the blaster out of his hand, I think. And I don't think you could default him for that. I think that was the right way to go. In that situation, but I think he's just knows exactly who that is, and I think they all do, and I think he's just running on pure instinct at that point.
All right, so let's get into obviously he's been tortured, he's been through that, and of course if my daughter dates someone, I'm gonna do the same thing to them as Darth Vader did. So now we get into the whole carbonite freezing and everything, and he talks to Lando a bit. Obviously, he distrusts Lando even more. At this point, and he's about to be frozen in carbonite, and he doesn't know what's going to go on, and this is it. Maybe his last moments of seeing Leia and Chewie as well, but he gives Chewie a directive: you must protect the princess, and of course Chewie's going to obey that. That's what he's got to do. So Joe, what are your thoughts on this? And of course we get the famous line, "I know," and that's Han Solo, man. That's the thing. So I'll throw it to you, Joe, first, and then I'll throw it back to Ted.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, when I know Mike's gonna hate it. I gotta bring up Empire of Dreams, and just for those who don't know,
that's only because I mentioned my crazy Force theory. That's why. But go ahead.
No, it's not. Because I just love this description by Irvin Kershner. Okay, so Irvin Kershner directed The Empire Strikes Back. Is for those that don't know that he did. So in The Empire of Dreams, they're kind of interviewing him, and they're talking about this line. And they go through this. They're going through this. He's like, I'm not liking anything. Like, we do the scene over and over and over. And then he's like, Harrison, just do it. And then she says, I love you. And he says, I know. It's like, that's it. That's Han Solo. And I love that with like every fiber in my body, like the enthusiasm that he says that with in the interview, because I think that's Han Solo. If you want to ever describe Han Solo to somebody, that's how you describe Han Solo. It's that scene, that line, that, somebody says, well, how would you describe Han Solo? Well, when somebody tells him she's in love with him, he says, I know. Like, that's Han Solo, and I don't know. I'm kind of excited, so but
that's apparent.
But take it away, and I'll
Ted,
jump back in.
We'll throw it to you, Ted, because Joe is going to calm down here. We got to give him a cold shower there, Joe.
Yeah, no, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I think that's exactly it. I mean, and if you haven't seen Empire Dreams, I think everyone should go out and see it. It's a great documentary, and that's true. That is Han Solo, and that was, I believe, as you said, that was Harrison Ford coming up with that line on his own. It was not scripted in there, and it was just a great moment. And even in the end, when Chewie goes crazy and starts tossing stormtroopers, and Han, again we see him sort of take that leadership role, calm Chewie down, and again say, hey, live to fight tomorrow. Don't worry about me, which is something interesting too, right? He's not as worried about himself. He's willing to accept his fate at this point in time, and I'm not sure that he believes he's gonna survive this, right? I don't know that he knows he's gonna live himself to fight another day, and I think that's another change in sort of evolution we see in Han's character at this point in time.
Well, it's funny because Lando is essentially kind of doing the same thing for Bespin, living to fight another day and to figure things out as things are transgressing. He realizes things are getting worse and worse, and he wants to find his way out of it as well. And Han, he's willing to sacrifice himself, which echoes into Episode 7 here. It's almost the same thing in a way when you look at it. It mirrors what happens there. And obviously his character's grown quite a bit to this point, and he's willing to, like you said, Ted, accept his fate, die if he has to in order to save Chewie, Luke, and the princess and whatnot. So there, I guess, is there anything else we want to say before we wrap it up here? We'll go into the little wrap up real quick and final thoughts. But anything else to say with regards to the carbonite freezing scene? No? Okay. All right. So we'll move on. Let's give our wrap ups, our final thoughts on Han Solo from A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back, and I'll give it to our guest, Ted. Ted, what are your final thoughts? And then we'll get into our quick quotes and whatnot. So take it away.
Yeah, so I mean, I think he's Han Solo is just a great character to me. I mean, I always sort of viewed him as the cool guy and the one person you're happy to have on your team. He kind of reminds me of like an all-star athlete, maybe like a pro football player, someone who's brags a lot, if you will, can walk the walk and talk the talk, but you need him on you need them on your team because you put them on the field, they're going to call an audible immediately, but they're probably going to score a touchdown. But they're also going to get your team into all sorts of trouble either, and they're not necessarily going to follow the playbook, if you will. But at the end of the day, you're better off with him than you are without him.
Okay, so he's the Brett Favre of Star Wars. Joe, what are your final thoughts?
I think that just between these two movies, you see an amazing character arc, and it kind of makes me laugh where people criticize The Force Awakens, saying there was no character, there was no arc in the characters, like they don't progress, when it really takes two movies for it to happen to Han Solo. If you go back and look at the originals, so
even Vader. Vader, the same thing. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. There's absolutely no depth to that character really besides just looking cool. He was basically Boba Fett until he said that line, at least in my opinion. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Mike. Gosh. No, I just think it's an amazing evolution of a regular kind of Joe that while he has amazing skills and talents, he's not necessarily extraordinary. He's just kind of good at a lot of things, but he's not necessarily great except the piloting part, and I guess the smuggling kind of goes into that in my opinion. But I don't know. But he's not a Jedi. He's not he's not a prince or anything like that. He's just kind of the identifier with the normal people, and you see him become one thing. And while he still retains himself through these two movies, he's definitely come a long way. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, obviously, had Harrison got his wish, and I think Kasdan got their wish, and he died here, it would have been pretty fitting. I think we all would have been, all right, okay, we would have been fine with it and got on with our lives. But I think the bigger payoff came out later on with The Force Awakens. I think it was a much better way. If he had so George made a brilliant move by not killing off Han. But the character progression is just very epic here. And you guys, you pointed out a few more things to me tonight. How quickly he's more, a go-getter in this, and he's more of the guy that you thought he was in A New Hope. I think he was just kind of, boisterous about it. But then once he fell in love and cared for these people, he came out of his shell, and that's what happened. And it was great. And so we'll move on to part 2. But before we go, we'll give our favorite quotes real quick. I'll start with you, Joa. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's the exchange with Leia on the Falcon when they go in, the ship's shaking or whatever, and then don't get excited. And she's like, Captain, being held by you isn't quite enough to get me excited. And he's like, sorry, sweetheart, I don't have time for anything else. Because we don't see that kind of basically overtone of sex ever in Star Wars, and this is kind of the one time we ever get it, and it's just, to me, I just love it. And again, that's Han Solo, so I love it.
Ted, what do you think? What's yours?
Mine has always been never tell me the odds. I like that one, at least from these first 2 episodes. I thought that sort of sums up a little bit of what Han Solo. He doesn't want to know possibilities here. He's gonna do what he's gonna do, and it's gonna work. Darn it.
Okay,
well, sorry, Mike. I'll just jump in real quick. Sorry, Mike, but I just wanted to say that I am also partial to that one. For those that don't know, Rachel's favorite character was Han Solo, so I'd be remiss not to mention that here in this dissection. And actually, on her tombstone, I kid you not, it reads, "Never tell me the odds," and I had that put there. So wanted to throw that out there because it was her favorite character. Sorry, Mike, I know that's a tough act to follow, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say this is a boring conversation anyway. Luke, we're going to have company because that just makes me think of the podcast. So, and it is a boring conversation. So let's move on to part 2. Joe, real quick, tell them where they can like us, find us, and all that other stuff, and then we'll let Ted plug his stuff. So go ahead.
Yeah, you can find us first and foremost on the MakingStarWars.net podcast network. So heading over to MakingStarWars.net, you can find us and all the other great podcasts that are over there. And you can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/c/CantinaCast. You can find us on iTunes and every other podcast player. Everywhere you find us, any way you find us, please review us, feedback with us, rate us, subscribe to us, whatever you can do. We appreciate it. Twitter, @the Cantina Cast on Twitter, Facebook.com/the Cantina Cast, and that's pretty much the whole kit and caboodle.
All right, Ted, quickly plug your stuff, sir.
Twitter, and I'm gonna plug my Cantina Cast blog stuff here. Go check out. I do blogs twice a month, the 4th and the 24th of each month, and my latest one is called the Cliffhanger. That's available, just published a couple days ago, and it sort of takes a look at the ending of The Force Awakens and kind of speculates. We were left with that great moment of Luke and Rey standing face to face, and I left the theater wanting to see what happens next, and I mean immediately next. And I'm not so sure that we're gonna pick up right where it left off, and we may not get to see what happens next. So I just kind of speculate on that a little bit. So you can go check that out. That's over at the Cantina Cast right now.
All right, well, maybe we'll get another Vision, and Joe will be happy with that, because I know he loves the Vision so much. But anyway, that's going to do it for part 1, folks, and tune in to part 2, which will be next.